Hello and welcome to the special edition of Context. We're joining you from Washington, D.C., where today the Board of Peace meeting, inaugural meeting of this organization, is taking place. It was originally, of course, conceived back in September as part of Donald Trump's Phase 2 20-point plan, and later this very idea was endorsed by UN Security Council Resolution 2803, and officially organization was launched on the 22nd of January in Davos. 23 heads of government and state are present here in Washington, D.C. Number of questions to be asked and to be answered. Number one question, of course, to what extent this body will be effective in terms of Gaza reconstruction and governance, to what extent actually parties will come to terms in terms of establishing consensus, and one more question, of course, which is absolutely vital and goes to the very heart of this conversation. Will this organization in the long run be actually replacement for United Nations or wider UN system? And joining me now is Ubi Shabanda, Washington correspondent. Ubi, thank you very much indeed. And let's have a chat about this organization and this particular meeting. What are your major expectations, basically?
Well, the Board of Peace is chaired by President Trump, and what makes this organization so unique is that we are expecting a pledge of over $5 billion from the member states that would go to the Gaza Humanitarian and Reconstruction Fund. President Trump negotiated an end to the war. So now, what comes next? What is phase 2? And that is where President Trump has enacted this Board of Peace. He's gotten the buy-in of dozens of member states of countries around the world. We will have a number of heads of states here in Washington. Gaza is entirely destroyed. So the commitments that are being brought forth by the member states are not only billions of dollars that will be needed to essentially completely rebuild the destroyed Gaza Strip, but also we are expecting the International Stabilization Force, a commitment by the member states to also provide security personnel for a local police force and a stabilization force that would then establish the fundamentals for the governance of Gaza. Remember, a major demand by President Trump here is for Hamas to lay down its arms, that it will not have a role in the governance of the Gaza Strip in order to bring prosperity and rebuilding and reconstruction to the war-stricken region here now that the war has come to an end. But the hard part is not just bringing peace, but what happens after the peace.
Absolutely. Ubi, so two items going to dominate the landscape during the inaugural meeting. $5 billion pledge and also International Stabilization Force. But it's all of the two items are actually related to Gaza. One thing I think we need to explore, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2803 does mention Gaza and actually endorses this particular body in terms of aiding Gaza reconstruction and governance, and also in terms of authorizing it as an international stabilization force. But when it was launched on the 22nd of January, if you look at the charter, the text of the charter, there's no specific mention of Gaza. Gaza seems to be part of the wider landscape. Yeah. Do you think that there are those probably will be saying that this endorsement has nothing to do with the wider international remit, but has to do with Gaza? Do you think there is a dichotomy or disparity between the UN intent there and the way it is currently being projected by the US administration?
Yeah, look, President Trump wants a win. He doesn't want to wait through the whole bureaucratic process of the United Nations. There's real concern here in Washington, the policymaking circles and the Trump administration, that the UN simply is not up to the task. And that President Trump believes that through his leadership and bringing together a coalition that he's forged, that would then bring the necessary...
Sorry for interfering there, but that coalition, which is currently being formed, we're talking about 23 countries, I believe. The 23 heads of state and government will be present here. Do not include, that coalition does not include UK, the key ally of the United States, does not include some of the European countries, naturally, France and Germany. It does include Hungary, of course. It does include Italy as an observer status country, not as a permanent member. What does this organization actually indicate for the future of the transatlantic relationship, which many analysts are saying that is in tatters and has been in tatters for the past few years?
Well, it's all about who can bring the funding, right? Yeah. I mean, let's not forget the United States is still the largest donor country to the United Nations and to international peacekeeping. What's so interesting here is that President Trump has created this new structure because he doesn't want to go through the the bureaucratic process of the United Nations. That's what we've heard from this administration, that he believes that establishing reconstruction, humanitarian aid, but also more importantly than humanitarian aid is helping a country rebuild itself. That will require billions of dollars. So the strategic thinking of the Trump administration is you create commerce, you create wealth, you create prosperity, and that will bring peace to the Middle East. So President Trump choosing to establish a new board of peace really, I think, is indicative that the Trump administration just does not see the United Nations as being successful as a peacekeeping force. The big question, of course, is what will this stabilization force be authorized to do in order to maintain stability and local policing? I mean, we still have millions of people that are without homes, without shelter, there's no hospitals, everything has literally been destroyed. So you need a local stabilization force to prevent chaos from breaking out again.
In line with the charter, which was officially adopted and signed on the 22nd of January, President Donald Trump is going to be president for life. So it's something which is very different to the ways
of the Board of Peace.
Board of Peace, naturally, even after ceasing to become American president, of course. We got different layers to the organization. We got main board, heads of state and government present there. We got executive board, where people like U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blair will be present. Will be key operational unit really dealing with the matters related to Gaza. We'll have a specific Gaza-related board, which will be effectively coordinating affairs there. So what do you make of the structure? It does not look like a multilateral structure because it is very US-centered.
Yes.
It seems to be centered around the person of Donald Trump. Do you think it's the end of multilateralism?
Well, that's a very good question. We heard during the Munich Security Conference from Secretary of State Rubio saying that America first does not necessarily mean America alone. And of course, there have been many questions. Every year, the question comes up, is the transatlantic alliance dead? Well, look, we heard from President Trump on social media that the relationship with the United Kingdom is as important as ever. Of course, the United States is moving massive amounts of military cargo into the Middle East to potentially stage for what could be American military strikes on Iran.
Yep.
That logistical chain would not be possible without a string of American military bases across the European continent. So naturally, the president's worldview is enough talking, we've brought an end to the war, we need billions of dollars from countries in the region that need to see peace in the Middle East, stability in the Middle East for their own interests. And let's stop talking and let's start putting your money where your mouth is. And look, for many European observers, they view this as being, as being brash, but it is a quintessential Trump approach to geopolitics and to foreign policy.
And of course, the event is taking place at the Donald Trump Institute for Peace, and it's named after Donald Trump. Back in December, it was touted by the administration as the greatest deal maker in the history of humanity. And Donald Trump himself described this body as the most consequential body in the history of humanity, in the human history. But what I want to clarify, Ubi, if I may, this body is very different to many other international organizations that have been dealing with international conflicts. It seems to be very centered around personality of Donald Trump. And also Azerbaijan and Armenia are founding members of this organization. Do you think the continuation of Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process, with peace treaty being already initialed in Washington back in August 2025, could actually happen within this framework as well?
Could very well be. I mean, the weight of President Trump's political capital, his influence throughout the world was critical for the success of Azerbaijan and Armenia coming together and that peace process advancing. And that has provided the necessary momentum for President Trump to say, look, I've ended these wars. I've ended a conflict that was lasting for over 4 decades. I've stopped conflicts in other parts of the world from potentially breaking out into World War III. Who is better qualified in position than President Trump to ensure peace in a region that's seen continuous conflict, that there is a sustained process to ensure that peace is able to be maintained. And so the thinking from the White House is that, well, President Trump is the catalyst here, and who better than him than to chair this Board of Peace, given the failures that we've seen coming out of, for example, the Organization of Security Cooperation for Europe and of the United Nations Security Council and other bodies of the United Nations who are being accused of either serious corruption or incompetence.
Yeah, everybody, I mean, even the supporters of UN would say that this organization, its efficiency, everything related to it has been in tatters over the past few years. There have been many, many failures regarding different conflicts. But this particular body indicates a top-down arrangement, highly centralized, entrepreneurially driven. It looks like a different kind of international order is emerging. I put this question to President Aliyev when I was in Munich, and I said that, everybody's saying that old is not practically dead, but it's kind of dying, and the new has not emerged yet. And I put him question that, do you think that Board of Peace could be part of the new world order, new element? And he did appear to be incredibly positive about the prospect of this organization. More specifically, you and I had a brief chat earlier about Iran. It looks like that the fate of this country is being sorted out, has been decided upon at this precise moment in time. What do you expect? What will happen? And what do you think the position maintained by the inaugural meeting of Board of Peace is going to be about the fate of this country?
We are on the precipice. We are seeing new reports coming out of Washington that the president is close to making a final decision. And we're seeing fresh reporting that the talks in Geneva between the United States and the president's special envoys, Jared Kushner, and of course, Steve Witkoff, with their Iranian counterparts, that those talks did not really lead to any breakthrough. So the thinking here in Washington, according to the sources and according to the reporting that we're seeing, is that the president is closer than ever in deciding to potentially launch military strikes on Iran in what could be a sustained, perhaps not just multi-day, but multi-week military campaign. We are seeing on open source reporting more American military cargo aircraft entering the Middle East. We're seeing the F-22 fighter jets, F-35 fighter jets, dozens of them being forward deployed in the region. That doesn't happen unless the military is at an extremely high readiness level, or which means they are just waiting for the order from their commander-in-chief to either say, stand down and go back to your military bases, or war.
And President Donald Trump has been widely described by his supporters and those people who are not exactly supported as peacemaker in chief. One more question about this international legal order, because everybody's talking about UN collapsing before our very eyes. President Erdogan of Turkey a number of times said that the world is bigger than five, in reference to the composition of the UN Security Council. Do you think, bearing in mind the Board of Peace not entailing countries like UK, France, with Russia being invited but not having yet accepted the invitation, and China, this could actually be the beginning of the process with the gravity moving from that big five to the US-centered area wherein countries like Azerbaijan will play even greater role?
Well, that's what's so fascinating, is that this Board of Peace, launched by the American president, the leader of arguably the most powerful country on earth, could perhaps be giving greater weight to the voices of countries like Kazakhstan, like Azerbaijan, and other countries from Central Asia and the South Caucasus, as opposed to the ossified UN structure.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for your time. It's a fantastic moment to be alive, to observe all of these developments. Regionally, Azerbaijan, Armenia initiated the peace deal back in August. It's a watershed moment for the region, and the clout and importance of the region has increased massively over the past 1 year, and visibility also, of course, naturally increased as well.
That's right. It could very well prove to be that the Trump route for international peace and prosperity leads directly to the Board of Peace.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, the inaugural meeting of Board of Peace is one of the most consequential moments in international diplomacy. As I mentioned earlier, this organization was initially, the idea of this organization, this body, was floating in the air back in September as part of President Donald Trump's Phase 2 20-point plan. But on the 22nd of January, it emerged as an international organization. And the inaugural meeting, the subject matters which will be dominating that very meeting, of course, will go down in the annals of history as one of the most consequential precepts. Well, you've been watching Context, and see you very soon.